The title alone is creepy. There's someone inside your house. It's the newest horror from Netflix, but is it actually creepy? A high school student named Makani moves to a small town in Nebraska to live with her grandmother and finish school. When her classmates are stalked by a killer intent on exposing their darkest secrets and terrorizing victims while wearing a lifelike mask of their own face, Makani and her friends must discover the killer's identity before they themselves become victims. So I've been in the mood for a slasher film, and There's Someone Inside Your House looks like it could assuage that craving. Now, it's directed by Patrick Brice, who brought us the very unsettling Creep, and then its sequel, Creep 2. So I was intrigued going into this. The film opens with a scene that is ominous and foreboding, but also fairly obvious in its trajectory. And to me, it gave off feels of Scream. Now, there were portions to it that had that same ambiance, even though the setup was a little different. I like that the story dives right into the slasher gore, and it doesn't really waste time letting us know how gory this is gonna be. And we see some gnarly violence right from the start, and then the film doesn't shy away from it as the story progresses. The setting is a small town in rural Nebraska, and the focus is on a bunch of high schoolers. A motivating factor for the killing, and those that will come later, is secrets. So if you're hiding a secret, you're a potential target. The juicier the secret, the better. And while we don't get a lot of development on most of the characters in this, one of the central characters, Makani, does have some mystery to her background that kind of plays out over the course of the narrative. The story uses each of the students to create some air of suspicion around them in an attempt to keep us guessing at who the killer is. Now, some of it works, but I'm not sure there's ever enough to focus on any of them to cause a bunch of misdirection. The atmosphere the movie sets up is pretty effective, and there is this tense feeling that encompasses the situations, and mainly because we know that at any point, mayhem can ensue and the killer can strike. Now, I think a lot of the characters are generic, but also stereotypical in their design, even though they were diverse. There are self-important jocks, the appearing to be perfect, holier-than-thous, the mysterious loner, the rebel rich kid, the bullied outcast. I mean, the list goes on. I wish the characters weren't so obviously created and then had some more complex nuance to them. If they were more ambiguous in their design, I think more mystery and intrigue would be present. I wanted so badly to be wrong about who I thought the killer was. I was hoping against hope that it wouldn't be so blatantly obvious. Unfortunately, I was right, and the answer was so obvious. And then in the final moments of the climax, the story decides to preach at us in a way too obvious villain explanation. I mean, the rationalization is generic, it's lackluster, and it actually kills the suspense and anxiety of the scene. The special effects were great, and the gory violence looked real. I mean, it is brutal, and it really leans into the slasher genre with all that they do to the victims. I mentioned that the beginning of the movie gave me the feels of Scream, but there were other small moments sprinkled throughout that also feel like they drew inspiration from that modern classic. Some has to do with a deputy and family relationship, there's a very large hunting knife, and then at other times there are phone calls that have some subtle similarities. I mean, just don't expect a voice changer on the other end of the phone with someone saying, "Do you want to die, Sydney?" Or really, I guess in this case, "Do you want to die, Makani?" Now this is just a bit over 90 minutes, and it moves at a pace that doesn't get boring or slow. I mean, if it ever feels rushed, that's just because there's not much more to the story that could have been eked out. The movie isn't rushing the story, there's just not any more of it to tell. Now, I mentioned how the characters needed more intrigue and complexity to them to cause more doubt in the story, but I also think the mystery could be stronger if there had been more victims. If the body count begins to rise, anxiety builds, but it can also narrow the suspects. And when done correctly, even with a dwindling number of possible killers, misdirection can still keep us guessing. I also believe that if the chase sequences were more drawn out, the atmosphere would become palpable with dread. There are two that begin to draw out that unease, but we needed more. More victims and longer sequences of the killer stalking their prey. And by stretching these out, the pressure becomes suffocating with fear and nervousness. I think I just wanted more from this all the way around. I liked the concept, and I think the gimmick of the killer wearing a mask that looks just like the next victim, it's fun and twisted. And I also enjoyed the violent gore. I mean, it's a slasher movie, so I do expect some gruesome violence. But I needed less generic and stereotypical renditions of characters. I needed longer chase sequences, and then a much less obvious perpetrator. The bones were there to make this a very visceral and freaky watching experience, and the director knows how to craft a film that is disquieting because he's done it before. This, though, just left me wanting, and not in a good way. So overall, There's Someone Inside Your House begins with an intriguing premise and has a creepy gimmick, but it fails to deliver on quality thrills and chills. The violence is gory when it's present, but that's not enough to make this an interesting slasher film due to the obvious and common characters, and then the stunted anxiety caused by abbreviated chase sequences. There's sex, no nudity, a bunch of profanity, and a tremendous amount of violence. I give There's Someone Inside Your House 2 out of 5 couches. Do you have a favorite slasher film? I'd love to hear what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. I'm coming to get you, Sydney. Hello, Sydney. Do you want to die, Sydney?